Hello, hello, all. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds podcast, where we have the very hard conversations that help our community to heal and grow and be our best selves. I am Nijiama Smalls, and I am so delighted to have with me an awesome woman who um, I was just stumbled upon her platform and her background, her IG and all of that, and I was just so impressed by some of the things she's done, particularly in mental health, and just being able to show up as her authentic self, right? And that's impressive because not all of us are able to do that. But that's what we're going to talk to you about today is how we're able to do that. And we're going to talk to her about some of her diagnosis and so on. But her name is Lindsay Anderson. She is the founder of Consciously Coping. She is passionate about mental health, and she's also the creator of Transparency Tuesday. That's the hashtag Transparency Tuesday. She's also a African American woman who is living with bipolar disorder. So she uses her voice and shares her triumphs and challenges in living with this diagnosis. She is currently a PhD student in neuroscience at the Ohio State University. Lindsay is just awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. We are so delighted to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. I love these talks. They're always good. I don't get to do much because I'm in grad school, so it's always nice.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm so grateful to you because I know how it is when you're studying. So I'm thank you for taking out a chunk of your time to have this conversation tonight.
Absolutely.
So let's dive right into it. So first, describe because many people are living with the bipolar disorder diagnosis, right? And many people may feel that something is different going on inside of their head, right? Describe for us what bipolar disorder looks like.
So bipolar disorder, the main thing I think too that people kind of don't know is that it can look really different for a lot of people. So there are different types of bipolar disorder. So you have bipolar disorder 1 and then you have bipolar disorder 2. Now 1 is the one you kind of hear more stereotype and stigma and all of the things you hear. I'm bipolar because I'm upset right now and I feel good in a minute. And so that one is typically, that one has a lot of stigma. But the overall connection between type 1 and type 2 really is the depressive episodes. So a lot of people don't understand is that when you have bipolar disorder, you experience a lot of lows. And then they are typically can be followed by highs. So if you have type 1, you have extreme highs or, mania. And then type 2, you may not have, you may, you sorry, you don't have mania. You'll have what's known as hypomania. So it's a very mild type of mania that kind of fluctuates just like type 1. So for me, I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2. And for me, I experience a lot of depression. So I have a lot of depressive episodes, a lot of lows, but then I'll have those kind of peaks, and I kind of feel like I can rule the world. I kind of like, I have all this energy. I talk really fast. I can't kind of remember like my thoughts because my mind is kind of racing. And then once I come out of it, it kind of takes me back into a depressive episode. So it's really just that constant up and down of mood swings. But the most characteristic commonality between both is really those depressive lows.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. So, how old were you when you were diagnosed, and what did that process look like for you?
So I was diagnosed 2017. Yes. I was like, wait, how long ago was that? So 2017, I was diagnosed. So I was, what year is it now? I'm like, what year is it now? I was like 35. And it was an experience. So I was diagnosed initially when I was 12 with anxiety and major depression. that's what I was kind of diagnosed for a while. When I got in my early 20s, I was reassessed and I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and still the depression. So instead of it being major depression, it was what's known as dysthymia, which is kind of like a functional depression. So you're able to kind of function. And that diagnosis kind of stuck. A few years later, I got reassessed. It was the same thing. Except this time, the psychiatrist said, I really don't think you have dysthymia. He said, I really think you have bipolar disorder. And he said, but because, I haven't seen you a lot, you kind of need to go to like, a psychiatrist for a few times to kind of really see your mood swings or your personality. He was like, but that's what I think. So I was like, oh, whatever. So 2017, I was living in South Carolina with my stepmom and my dad. And I just was extremely depressed. And it was getting worse and worse and worse. And so I decided, I was like, okay, you gotta sit down, you gotta go to a psychiatrist. Like this has been going on too long. So I go and I was there about an hour and a half. And so she was, going through all the questions and, we were talking. She was kind of like doing a lot of past history. And at the end she said, so I think you have bipolar disorder. She said, I really think you have just been riddled with a lot of depression. And when you go to like a therapist or a psychiatrist, they're only seeing you when you're depressed. She's like, they're not seeing you consistently enough to kind of track the high moods. And she said, well, I want to try this medication. It's called Amygdala. She said it works really well with people who have bipolar disorder type 2. She said, so let's try it out. Let's see how it works. She said, you're going to have to try, you're going to have to titrate for a few weeks. She was like, but let's see. And we started with 25 milligrams and eventually I made it to 200 milligrams. And between, I would say around like 75 milligrams, I could tell the difference.
Mm.
Like, it was just like, it kind of clicked and I was like, whoa, this is what it feels like to like live what people call a normal life. And so it took a long time. So it was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of mental health struggles for a long time before I kind of got like, that right treatment.
Wow. I heard you say in a previous conversation that I saw online that you heard someone say Black women over exaggerate, especially when it comes to their symptoms. And I think that is so key because that's where the disparities in our healthcare generally that's what triggers that, right? Tell us about that.
Hmm. So interestingly, one of the women from Married to Medicine, she's the OBGYN. I can't remember her name. But she also said this more recently within the like last 2 years that her black patients, the black women who are pregnant,
Mhm.
over exaggerate their symptoms. They come in and
That's
she's like,
right.
they just
Yep.
over exaggerate, they're in pain.
She got a
And
lot
it
of
was this
flack
whole
for that.
thing. A lot. And she should have.
Yes,
I'm like,
exactly.
do you not know the mortality rates
Mhm.
of black women?
Mhm.
I'm like, girl, like you should know that you're a doctor. So that was the time. But when it comes to mental health too, and just black women in general, like everything we do is considered over exaggerative.
Mhm.
We're too loud.
Exactly.
Right, so we're too loud. That's over exaggerative. We wear too much gold jewelry. Our nails are too long.
Mhm.
Everything we do is considered over exaggerative.
Mhm.
So when we start talking about how we feel, that's the first thing people say. Oh,
Mhm.
black women just too extra. Y'all
Mhm.
just do too much.
Mhm.
Y'all always got to complain about something. So we're, we live in an environment and a world and a society where that's not for us. Like
Mhm.
this wasn't made for us. So anything we do is going to be too much.
Right, yeah.
There will never be anything we do that'll be,
Mhm.
enough or the right way to do things.
Right.
But when it comes to mental health, I will say like my experience has definitely been, especially working in like the mental health like advocacy world, a lot of people say I was always told that I'm extra, or I was told that I'm complaining too
Mhm.
much, or I was told I'm taking things too serious
Mhm.
and I'm weak. And so, we hear these things, but that creates a huge issue for people wanting to go get help
Mhm.
because you feel bad, right? So that's like shame. So
Mhm.
someone is making you, pushing that shame on you,
Mhm.
and shame and guilt are two different things.
Mhm.
Guilt, of course,
Right.
is I have done something bad.
Mhm.
Shame is like, I am a bad person.
Right,
So
yeah.
when you make people feel, when you make people feel like they're just being dramatic,
Mhm,
and that shame comes over and they're just like, oh, well, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. They
mhm,
kind of push back. They just retreat. And that's the worst thing you can do.
mhm,
And so it's very common. I hear it a lot in like panels, or if I go to like a conference,
mhm.
so many people in the audience are just like, well, I told my mom and she told me I was being
Oh
dramatic.
my gosh.
And so,
Mhm,
yeah, and so I don't want to go get help.
mhm.
And I'm like, I'm just like, no, 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 no. Um, and it's hard.
Ex
It's hard, especially when loved ones tell you that. Whew,
exactly, exactly, and that's the
whew.
first thing is we have to stop telling each other that. Take each other seriously. We're not being
Hmm.
extra. If someone is in pain, they're in pain. If someone's having an off day, they're having an off day. Accept that
Hmm.
and then point them towards healing.
Absolutely. And that's, I think things things are kind of getting better. We have a lot of social media.
Mhm,
We have a lot of amazing Black mental health. I mean, just doing awesome work.
mhm.
All I mean, just
Yes.
completely awesome. And you see them online, and they're saying like, "Hey, do not feel like you are weak. Do not feel like you're doing too much. Do not, like, go seek help. Like, this is the online space. I am sharing this information so
Mhm.
you can go take care of yourself." So I do think, we have seen an increase in Black women definitely going to therapy, a huge
Oh,
increase. So
yes.
now, we got to uplift our Black men to get them there too. And so I think, I'm a very community person, very
Same,
communal.
same.
We got to work together.
Mhm.
Like, we're not gonna make it in this society if we don't work together. So
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly, and a
Hmm.
big part of working together is having empathy and compassion for each other, and
Hmm.
not saying things that would prevent someone, or shame them when they're crying out for help. Yes, absolutely.
Right. Right.
So you mentioned, your medication.
Yeah.
Let's talk about medication because for example, my niece has been diagnosed with bipolar 2, and she won't take
Mhm.
her medication. And when something
Mm.
happens, I know it like the back of my hand. I know her now, like her pattern, I should say.
Mhm.
And if
Mhm.
something major happens, she's going to be in the bed sleeping. I cannot get her
Yep.
out of bed sleeping, from sleep, stop her from sleeping. And I know that if she had medication, she would be better. Because I know I'm not, you mentioned you are, dealing with anxiety. I'm suffering from anxiety as well, and I take medication, and I can tell you it's a tremendous difference. And I don't have any issue with telling anybody Effexor is my life saver. Jesus and Effexor.
Yeah.
So tell
Hey, let me say, both of those things can work
they can
together, honey.
coexist. Yes, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, so talk to us about medication and help us understand why some people don't want, why are we running from taking the medication, and any advice or tips you can get for people who are struggling with the diagnosis, particularly bipolar disorder, and they're hesitant
Mhm.
about the taking the medication.
Oh, that's a good one. I have so many thoughts about this. Let's see if I can keep them
I know.
concise. I don't know. Who That's a good question. So, what I will say, I'll just use my personal experience. So, for me, like when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, it was hard for me to accept. So that was the first thing. Like, I remember like just sitting, it felt like a dream.
Mhm,
And she's like talking, I'm just like, what? She gives me the prescription, and I'm just like, and so I go, like, I leave and we schedule an appointment, whatever. I get in my car and I break down
mhm,
immediately, just sobbing in the car. I had to go back to work, so I was just like sobbing in my car, and I was like, my life is over. Like, nobody will ever want to be my friend. No, I will never get married again. Like, like, life, this is it. And I was like, I don't want to take medicine because, like, I just don't want to do that. Now, because I had taken, anxiety medication before,
mhm,
and anxiety medication hadn't really helped as much as I would have liked it. It kind of helped with anxiety, but very minimally.
mhm.
But I still was depressed. So I was like, oh, see, none of this medicine is working. right? I'm like, oh no, 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 no. But what I didn't know is that I was misdiagnosed. And I think that's a fear for a lot of people. Black people get misdiagnosed
Mhm.
a lot, especially black men. We have a lot of black people in our community that actually are diagnosed that have have symptoms and behaviors of schizophrenia, and then are often diagnosed with something else.
Mhm.
So that is, for black people, that is a common concern, which I totally understand. We are always over medicated. I mean, anything we do, they're like, oh, you need medicine, oh, you need this. Our kids, people talk about it all the time, like, oh, my daughter, they're trying to give her Ritalin, and I know that's not, I know it's not ADHD, I know it's, her environment, she's in the school, and so we're constantly over medicated. I think that's the biggest thing with, like, black people. Like, they hear people like myself say I was
Mhm.
misdiagnosed. I mean, since I was 12 years old. Like, we try. I mean, I've been on Prozac and Paxil and Wellbutrin and Effixor. I've been on abuse bar. I mean, literally, I have been on everything.
Mhm.
And so people hear that and like, well, if you're taking this medication and it doesn't work, then what? Why? Like, well,
Mhm.
why am I gonna do it? So I do think that's one, like, huge thing. And then of course there's a lot of distrust in the medical field, right? So a lot of
Especially our
doctors
community.
don't listen to us.
Mhm.
Yep, yep, they don't listen to us often. I mean, you have to really go in and advocate for yourself and
Mhm.
say, no, something is wrong with me. I know it because I know myself better than anybody else.
Mhm.
So, that's kind of that secondary thing. And then, of course, another big one is stigma.
Mhm.
People, people are like, I don't want anybody to know I'm on medication, which you don't have to tell anybody.
Mhm.
That's not anybody's business. That
Mhm.
you don't have to tell a soul. That's between you, God, and you.
Mhm. Right. Yes.
Like, you, God, and you.
Yes.
I'm like, that's not between
Mhm.
anybody else. If you choose to tell people, then that's an entirely different situation. But you don't have to tell anybody that you're taking medication.
Mhm.
And the good thing about medication is, if it works, it works. And you're like, yes, I feel better. And now I can, like, integrate in life and I can
Mhm.
do things and get things done. If it doesn't work, when you advocate for yourself and you go see your doctor, you say, this don't work.
Mhm.
I feel worse. What can we do?
Right.
And you don't have to wait. Most people are like, oh, well, I don't have another appointment for 3 weeks. And it's like, call them now. You call them and say, hey, this crap ain't working. We gotta figure something out. You gotta get on their nerves. So I think, like, it's a multitude of reasons. It's not necessarily one. I think it's a multitude. It's definitely like your environment. You might be around people, again, who say, like, girl, like, we can go out and drink, you'll be fine. Like, oh, you want to forget how anxious you are, let's go out and have a drink. That's the worst thing you can do for anxiety. Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Drinking is
Yep.
not gonna help.
Yep. 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 I know that from
You are just gonna be
experience.
more anxious. Me too. You are just gonna be more anxious.
That's
So
exactly.
drinking is not gonna do it. So my advice, I always tell people this. I remember I used to be married. I have a son. I was married. Me and his dad were married, and he, like, after we kind of, I guess, like, when we separated or whatever, and I started going to therapy for a little bit, and he was like, "Oh, when we together, you never would go, and I told you to go, and you wouldn't do it, and you wouldn't get help, and now what do you mean you're going?" And I remember telling him, I was like, I went because you wanted me to go, and that's why it didn't work.
Mm.
I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to talk.
You got
I
to
didn't
go
want to
for
go.
you.
I didn't want to cry.
Mm.
You have to go for you.
Mhm.
And so when I realized, like, okay, you got to go for Lindsay. A friend at that time was like, hey, I struggle with a lot of mental health issues. She's like, I'm gonna send you my therapist number. You don't have to go. Here you go. It's you got it.
Mhm.
And I sat on it for weeks, and I was like, oh no. And I was so depressed. I called and I was, like, crying on the phone. I was like, please, like, I need a therapist. And then I started to see that was the first black therapist that I'd ever saw in my life. And it was great. I loved her. I went every 2 weeks. She was amazing. Great experience. I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh. But it helped. And so, I think just being able to, have those experiences and understand that it may not go well and it
Mhm.
may not work, but it's okay, because there's a ton of other people, ton of other therapists that you can go see. I
Exactly.
just ton of other therapists. But if I had, if it wasn't like I wanted to go, it would have never it. anytime I'm ever going to therapy because somebody wanted me to go, it never worked. But when I started going in 2017, because I was like, I want to go, I want to feel better,
Mhm.
it was a whole different thing. And it was hard. Like, I don't want people to think I went and, oh, the next day I felt better. No,
It's a
it took
process.
time.
Mhm.
It's a process, right? And so I was very nervous to talk. I didn't want to talk because I didn't want to cry. That was my number one in my whole life. I was like, I don't want to go to therapy because I don't want to cry. I don't want to be up in there crying. And I went. It's the first time I cried. I was like, I'm so sorry. I was so sorry. And so she's like, why are you apologizing? Like what's going on? So once I kind of broke that like cry barrier, I was good to go. I was
Mhm.
like, okay, now let me open up, a little more. And if you open up, therapy is helpful.
Mhm.
The more guarded you are, I mean, you kind of wasting your time
Mhm.
more than theirs. They get paid,
Mhm.
so you ain't wasting their time. You wasting your time,
Right.
and you can be getting just the treatment that you want. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Wow, you shared so many nuggets there. You know, I heard a quote that say, "Crying is your body's way of saying you need to heal." And it's
Mm-hmm.
helping, those tears are helping push you through that process. And I'll tell you, anyone
Mm-hmm.
who knows me know I love a therapy. I'm always on somebody's couch. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't if I cry from the moment, there have been times I cry from the moment I got there to my session
Same.
ended,
Same.
when you start peeling back those layers.
Yes,
And there was
and it feels
it feels
good.
good. I walk in with my tissue, like, all right, it's gonna be one of those sessions. And I'm trying to get my niece, and my niece is younger, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm of Gen X, and I thought
Mm-hmm.
my generation, we broke down some of the stereotypes. My
Mm-hmm.
niece is Gen Z.
Ah,
Yeah, so
okay.
she's not even a millennial. And so I thought we broke
I'm a millennial. Yeah.
I thought we broke down those stereotypes and the stigmas
Yeah.
regarding, medication and therapy. I knew they still
Mm-hmm.
existed, but I thought we had chipped away. But
Wait.
my
Mm-hmm.
niece, it was hard to get her to go and consistently see a therapist and, to take
Mm-hmm.
the medication. And she had, kind of like what you discussed, she would take one and it wouldn't feel good for her, or it exasperated it. And I
Mm-hmm.
told her the same thing happened with me. And see, the thing is,
Yeah.
medication isn't one size fits all.
Right.
Wellbutrin may work for you, but it may not work for me, right?
Nope, nope.
And so, and
Yep.
I told her, I said, you have to go back to your therapist, because that's what I did. I went
Yep.
back and I said, this isn't working for
Yep.
me.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do? And he switched it, right? And I've been on Effexor ever since, and it's been working like a charm. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm saying all of that to say, we may have had a quote unquote bad experience with medication, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we stop. We may have had a bad
Right.
experience with a therapist. And a therapist is just
Yep.
like any other relationship, in that, we've got to find one that's a fit for us. The one I have right now is just awesome. But
Yeah.
it took me a while to find this relationship, because you got to find somebody that understands you. I need culturally
Mm-hmm.
competent therapy,
Yes.
because I don't want to have to
Yes.
explain, over explain and go back and what this
Child,
means and what.
uh-uh.
Yeah, I need somebody, that gets it gets us,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Mm-hmm.
all of that, those are the things that we have to take in consideration and
Yep.
push for and keep pushing,
Yeah.
because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's about our quality of life.
Yep.
I will tell you, Effexor makes me a better spouse. It makes me a better
Yes.
mommy. It makes me a better friend.
Yes.
I don't like who I am
Yes.
without it.
Yes.
And
I make the joke all the time. I'm like, if I was not on medication, y'all would like me. Like, I tell people, I'm like, I'm so serious. I'm like, if I was not, you would be like, what in the absolute you know what? And
Exactly.
it's that serious.
Mhm.
I don't like myself when I'm not on medicine. Like you
Exactly.
said, like I don't like the way I move. I don't like the fact that I don't have energy. I don't, like I can't sleep and I'm stressed. I
Whew.
just don't like that.
Been
Yeah,
there.
I'm just like, I don't like the way it feels. It make me feel, I'm just like, I want to be relaxed. I want to be good to go,
Mhm.
and so I totally understand.
Yes.
Totally understand. Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. So you are a
Hmm.
mom too, right? How does
Hmm.
your diagnosis impact you being a mommy?
I have noticed when I first had my son, I within his first year I had a mental health crisis and I was in a mental health facility for 30 days.
Mhm.
And so he was staying with my grandmother at the time. Her and my grandfather were still alive. And so he was already like back home where I was from, with them. They were just helping out so we could save money with daycare. So he was with them. Um, but I know in those early years of his life, I was so depressed. I was so anxious. So I was always irritated. Oh my God, every little thing, just just like, my grandmother, it's so funny. I just told him this a few weeks ago. My grandma, we went out, oh, it wasn't a few weeks ago, it was last week. We went to dinner. And I remember my grandma told me something when he was young. And I was telling him about it. I said, she told me, like, when you're upset with your kids, you got to calm down. She was like, you know, physical abuse is horrible. She's like, and you're bigger than him. You may hurt him. She's like, but verbal abuse is just as bad. And she told me, she was like, you can say something to your child that will hurt them forever. They will never forget it. And I was like, oh, I was like, whatever. I know it. I was just like, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. And I remember like the next time he did something like in school or whatever, I was like, so upset, so frustrated. Why are they calling me? I'm at work and whatever. And I remember I got home and I was like starting to scream and I remember like kind of it was just like surreal. I kind of looked at his face and the look on his face and the fear in his eyes
Mhm.
and how, I could just see him so upset. It kind of was like, oh, this is what she means. Oh, that's what my grandma meant. And the only way I could combat that was to take care of myself because I was always frustrated. I
Mhm.
was always irritated. I
Mm.
wasn't sleeping well, so I was always sleepy. I wouldn't eat well. So when you have depression or you have a mental health disorder, we don't take care of ourselves.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, whether we want to pretend like we do or not, we just don't really take care of ourselves, not as well as we could.
Mhm.
Like we don't really attend to ourselves. And so when I started taking medication, our relationship changed.
Mm.
I didn't fuss as much. I was able to, he would do something and I was like, okay, deep breath, you can do this. Let's have this conversation. Like let's have this conversation without screaming and saying hurtful things. And, so our relationship quickly changed once I got on medication. And we have a great, I mean, we had a good relationship then, but we have a great relationship now. And so I do feel like me getting on medication has really made me a better mother. And I know a lot of people like in my family are like, oh, like they don't like I let him, tell me how he feels and I let him talk to me about school and he has a girlfriend. He's 16, so he has a girlfriend now. He's telling me about, and they're like, oh, you let him talk to you like that. And I'm like, well, he's just telling me how he feels. Like I I'm confused. And so but it's made me a better mom.
Mhm.
Even today he did something and I was like, why would you do, like, he got home and I was like, why would you do that? I had money. I was like, he had money in his account and I look at my account and I'm like, where did his money go? I look, he spent it all on Apple Pay on buying games. So he come in my room like, and he
That would
gets
be
out of school. I'm,
boys.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, why would you spend $80 on games? I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, don't be mad. I said, I need you to step out for a minute. I was like,
Give
I'm
mommy a
fine,
minute.
because I was give me a second. And so then I talked to him. I was like, dude, you can't do that. Like you just can't spend. I was like, we have had this conversation, you know, just telling him like we've had this conversation over and over again. We've talked about this. You want to spend money. I know you got money, it's fine, but let me know when you start wanting to make, you know, large game
Mhm.
purchases, because you don't know that money is for your hair. You gotta get your hair done.
Mhm.
You spending money that you know. And so, but had I not been on medication and he had spent
Mhm.
$80, I probably would have blew my, you know, I
Right,
would have
yeah.
blew up.
Mhm.
And so now just my medication really stabilizes me, and I can kind of, you know, just be really aware of myself, and I can be aware of like my emotions and how I feel, and it's able to like regulate that, and I'm not so on edge all the time. So it's definitely helped our relationship. And I think a lot of, especially for moms, especially Black moms, there's a lot of expectations for
Oh,
us, and
yes.
expectations get us frustrated too. So like
Yes.
we're already frustrated because
Mhm.
everybody expects us to be all, do all, say all.
Mhm.
So those expectations mixed with, you know, now you're depressed
Mhm.
and you're anxious and you're irritated,
Mhm.
and that just it just sends you spiraling.
Mhm.
It sends you spiraling, and I know a lot of like I know from my mom. She also has bipolar disorder. She has type 1, but growing up, you know, she didn't get diagnosed until, oh my gosh, she was like 50 maybe.
Mm.
So maybe like 13 years ago. So I had to deal with her up and down.
Mhm.
You know, she had me in 20, so for 30 years.
Wow.
I had to kind of deal with that like up and down, which was hard. You know,
Mhm.
that was a hard thing to kind of deal with. But like, you know, our relationship is better now, and I think she's benefiting because I'm a mental health advocate.
Right.
I remember she got to see me talk for the first time, and she was just like, "Oh my gosh!" Like she was like, "I
Wow.
just didn't." Like she was just like, "Oh my, that was so good," and she was just like telling people like, "Oh, my daughter is like she's a mental health advocate," and so even now she's like, "I really need to go to therapy. I really need to get back," because I had talked her into going to therapy. She was going. Talked her into getting on medication. She was doing good. I was like, yes. So you know, so so our relationship has changed. So I do think, you know, just taking care of your mental health, especially if you have, not especially, take care of your mental health in general, but if you have a mental health condition, you will have better relationships with your kids, because that all of those things will be regulated. You know, just going to therapy, that'll help you get that out, that frustration. You can talk about your kids. I talk about my son in therapy all the time. I'm like, he getting on my he a teenager, he getting on, you know. But those things help, because then I'm not screaming at him. I'm telling my therapist. So by the time I get home, I'm like, "Ooh, I got that out. I'm
You got
good."
it all out.
I'm like, "Okay, I got it out." So those things benefit us, and you know, as parents, we want to be the best parents. You right? You know, we want to be good parents. We want to make good decisions and sound decisions, and we want our kids to be happy in a happy home. The best way to do that is to take care of yourself. So.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
You know, I'm impressed that you said your mom said she wanted to pursue therapy because,
Mhm.
you know, many of our parents of that generation, our baby boomers, right?
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
don't, you know, they have no parts of it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I've been trying
Mhm.
to get my mom to go to therapy, you know, for years, and you know, all of the things,
Mhm.
everything she says, you know, I'm afraid they're gonna lock me up. What, mom? Come
Yep.
on now.
My mom. My mama has said, I'm like, lady, just go. She come up with all kind of
Oh,
excuses. I'm like, what?
anything, whether it makes
Just
sense or not.
anything.
Yeah. And you're like, okay. But that's huge, you know, and that's one of the things I
Mhm.
want to do is to get that generation to
Mhm.
embrace therapy
Mhm.
and therapeutic resources because there's a lot of diagnosis amongst them. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of things that they're dealing with that they haven't been diagnosed with
It's,
properly,
yep.
because they won't pursue it, and it can make their
Yeah.
relationships with their family a whole lot better. And
Yep.
then, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're in their golden years. We
Mhm.
want to
Mhm.
see. I told my mom this. I was like, I want you to live your last stint on this earth
Mhm.
in heavenly peace that you haven't been
Yes.
able
Yes.
to experience because you have so much,
Mhm.
you know, that you haven't processed, you know, especially, you know,
Yep.
my mom, she attended the first integrated high school, in her town in South Carolina. So that's a lot. Imagine the trauma of going
Mhm.
to a school with people that you don't that don't want you to be there. You don't want to be there. They don't want you to
Mhm.
be there, and they make it known that they
Mhm.
don't want you to be there. Not only the
Oh
students,
yeah,
the teachers, and so on. That is a lot.
everybody.
Yeah, that is a lot for a
Mhm.
teen to deal with that she has never
Mhm.
dealt with. She's never processed that in a healthy manner. So all of it gets tucked
Mhm.
inside, and then something happens, she's triggered
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
she's acting out off of that experience that she never dealt with. So, if you're
Yep.
out there listening and you're a baby boomer age, please go get some therapy.
Please okay. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It is
It's
okay.
okay. And I mean, we talk, black folks, we talk a lot about, auntie, at the party who always got the red cup. She always drinking. She always angry. She always mad. She's most likely anxious. She
Mhm.
might be just having anxiety, and that her best way to get through it is like, I'm gonna drink and I'm gonna get drunk and I'm gonna party it up and I'm gonna feel better. So we have these people in our family. We have these uncles who have whatever behaviors, and
Mhm.
a lot of people are anxious. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
It's the world we live in, right? So
Mhm.
I just feel like this, especially America, is a breeding ground for
Mhm.
anxiety.
Oh,
I feel like a
absolutely.
lot of people, yeah, a lot of people are walking around anxious all day long.
Mhm.
So in the black community, we see these behaviors, we see these patterns in our family and our friends, and they're just like, oh, that's just who I am.
Mhm.
I'm fine. That's who I am. So,
Yeah.
hmm
And so my husband and I had this conversation about, when you grow up in black families and in the black community or whatever, we normalize a lot of very toxic behavior. Like you mentioned, the auntie with the red cup, or the drunk uncle, or the drunk auntie, the severe. I can remember, growing up, people with very severe mental health issues, and I'm talking about like dealing with
yeah,
schizophrenia,
yeah,
hallucinations. Back then, you just, you see them on the street, they're talking to each other, they're talking to themselves, and all
hmm
the erratic behavior, they're homeless and so on. And back then, everybody just said they're just crazy, right? And they chalked it up to that.
hmm
Now, as an adult with more knowledge, you know that there was a mental
yep,
illness
yep,
there
yep,
that went
yep,
undiagnosed. And back then, they
yep,
were afraid to go anywhere because it could have meant getting put in a
yeah,
straight jacket, all of those types of
yes,
things,
yes,
because our
yep,
system was so broken, and the state run
hmm
hospitals were so broken.
hmm
So there was always
hmm
the fear, and I remember the adults would use um that fear of going to a state-run hospital against you to help children to behave. And in my where I'm from
yeah,
in South Carolina,
yeah,
the state-run hospital, mental hospital, was on in Columbia, South Carolina, on a street called Bull Street. And I
hmm
remember our elders would always say, "You want me to take you to Bull Street? I'll take you there and drop you off. If you do XYZ, you're gonna get
uh-huh,
dropped off." And so there was always this fear. So they were
fear,
perpetuating it, keeping it alive, right? And
yes,
now we have so many amongst us that are dealing with severe mental health issues that are unhoused.
mhm,
We are wishing for the state run hospitals so that they can go and get the supports they need without, living on the streets and whatever the case is. So,
mhm,
um, yeah,
mhm,
it's interesting that you said that because, it just brought me back to that conversation about um how we normalize that behavior, and how we add it on to the stigmas in our
mhm,
community. And as I said, we got to do our best to break
yep,
those down.
we
S-
do, absolutely.
so now tell me about bipolar and being in the workplace. Like, has it ever shown up for you in the workplace and so on?
Definitely now. So I'm in graduate school, and graduate school at any level, master's,
Oh yes.
PhD, MD, whatever, ED, whatever whatever level you are in,
Mhm.
graduate school is hard.
Oh yes.
Graduate school is
It
hard. It's a
sucks
lot
your
of
life.
studying. It's your whole let me tell you, I'm preparing for my qualifying exams. All I was in lab, because I'm getting my PhD in neuroscience, so I do research. I was in lab yesterday from what was yesterday, Tuesday. So I was in. I think I got there at like 10 a.m. I didn't leave until 11:30 p.m. So like I have long
Whoa.
days sometimes. Today I
Mm-hmm.
decided to work from home.
Mm-hmm.
I had to finish this document that I have to submit to my committee. I was supposed to submit it last week, but it's okay. I'm trying to get it by tomorrow. But it's a lot. When I first got to graduate school, so I'm from Georgia, I'm from Savannah,
Mm-hmm.
Georgia. So when I left to come here, to come to
Uh-huh.
Ohio, of course that meant what? I had to start over with therapy and with psychiatry. And I did the thing that a lot of people do that I always do. Well, I feel fine. Okay, I can set off of therapy for a little bit. I feel like I'm good without medication, so I started. And I came here in July 22. Started with classes. Classes was kicking my butt,
Mm.
and I felt the anxiety. I felt, right. So I started having these feelings, and I was just like, the first thing I said was like, well, nobody else around me is going to therapy. Nobody else around me is doing. I can do this just like they can. I can be just like them, and I can do it without this help. I don't right in my mind. Like, I have this under control. That's my biggest thing with me is I'm like, I have this under control. And I didn't have it. My anxiety increased. I started, I couldn't sleep at night. I started having panic attacks again. I would, vomit before class because
Oh.
my body was just so,
Mm-hmm.
so uptight and so tense. I never did good on the exam. The first exam completely bombed it.
Oh.
And that just tanked me. It was so, like, I was devastated. I mean, just absolutely gutted. And my mental health just it from that day forth, it was like a steady decline. And so it showed up in everything I did. I could never pass the exam. I wound up having to drop that class and retake it again because I was doing so poorly. And they were like, you fail, you're gonna get put out of grad school. So you need to drop it so you can stay and just, potentially take it next year. So that, tanked me. By the time October came, I was completely burnt out. The depression had started to sink in, and I was, staying home. I wasn't doing anything. I didn't want to go out. My room, oh my God, my room. I mean, it was just stuff
Mm.
everywhere. I wasn't cooking. I was just like ordering food because I didn't have energy. I was just like ordering DoorDash or like walking up the street and like grabbing a pizza. So everything had kind of, started to kind of fall apart. Um, and my son was at with my mom in Savannah, so that I did have that right. So I did have like he was being taken care
Mm-hmm.
of. So I was like, okay. So I didn't have just the stress of being a parent. But my mental health, it kept getting worse. It just kept, and it showed up in everything I did in lab. It showed up in class. It showed up in my friends. It showed up just my everyday. Like it just was like running rampant. And so I just continued that my whole first year. I was like, you can get it back in control. I just kept telling myself, you can do this. You can get yourself out of this. Well, I did not get myself out of it. So last year, 2024, um I got sick. So I have a neurological disorder as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I was in lab, got sick. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and so I think I was out of the lab for like 4 months. And of course, my neurologist and my doctors, and I had to go to physical therapy, and like all the things, and they're like, "Dude, it's stress." They're like, "It flares up with stress. Like you gotta start taking care of yourself." And they were like, they set me up with a physical therapy
Oh.
psychologist. And so I saw her, and she kind of helped me just like plan my day and like trying to do those things. She of course referred me to a therapist, and so now and I started seeing a therapist on campus, and then I started seeing a psychiatrist. So they were like, we need you to get everybody. So they
Get your
sent the
team.
referral. It was like, it was like, girl. And so I did go to the therapist. She was black. I didn't like how she did her therapy, so I did stop going to see her. So I do need to find another therapist. But I see my psychiatrist. I just saw her on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
So I do see my psychiatrist. We started back on medication. And since I started back, things are, I'm doing better. I'm able to get things done. My advisor in my lab was like, he does a annual review. So we have my lab advisor does an annual review. My program does review. Child, we have reviews. I swear, like every few months. But me and him had a review, and he was like, "You have improved so much." He was like, and I was like, I was like, I'm really hard on myself. I don't think, I was like, I don't think I've done anything. I'm like, I don't think I know anything. He was like, absolutely not. He's like, I don't know what you did, what you're doing.
Mhm.
And I told him, I was like, I'm going to therapy. I'm like, I'm taking medication. Like that's literally why you're able to say like you've improved so much.
Mhm.
I don't, I try not to overwork myself. I'm like 32 to 35 hours a week in lab. That's it. Like we ain't doing all this in lab 12, 13 hours unless I need to be there, 10, 11 hours one day. Like today I didn't go in. I was like, okay, I was there for 12 hours. I'm not going in today. I'm staying home.
Mhm.
Um so all of those things, I started making those changes,
Mhm.
and people around me can tell. Like people literally are like, "Oh my god, you seem happier.
Mhm.
You like you want to do stuff now. You don't can't like girl, I was canceling everything.
Mm.
I would be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go with y'all to the movies, and then I text them like, I would just make up something. Oh y'all, like I need to wash clothes. I don't have nothing to wear. Like everything's done. Like
Mm.
I would just make up random stuff and just cancel, 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 cancel. Now if I cancel, it's literally like, hey, y'all, I'm coming down with a cold or
Yeah.
I don't feel, like
Mhm.
I'm tired or something. But I go and I have fun and I have a good time. So yeah, it has shown up in grad school a lot, but it's gotten much better. So anybody who's listening, just learn from me. You do not have it under control. Never think I got it under because you don't. I promise you. The only way you have it under control is by building like you said, your team.
Mhm.
You gotta have your team. Everybody doesn't need medication, but I do, and I know I do, and I know I need it.
Right.
So you build your team, you get your tools in your toolbox, you use them, and that's what you do. I promise you. As soon as you say, I'll be fine without medication for a few months. No, 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 no. Don't do it.
It's interesting because I have two friends with that are both dealing with bipolar, and so what
Hmm.
I'm noticing is a pattern because it seems like people with bipolar are definitely intellectual, very smart, very sharp, and they're driven because they
Hmm.
went the grad school route as well. So it's like, hearing you talk about what you went through, what you're going through in grad school is like talking, to my friends because it's the exact same thing. So
Hmm.
that ambition is there. So
It will drive
it
you.
will drive you. So does depression, it zaps the depression zaps your energy?
Oh man, I'm telling. I get depressed, and it's just like I just energy is gone. I,
Mm,
I mean, I sleep all day. I can't get out of the bed.
mm,
I don't like. For example, when I first got here, and all that stress hit me, and I got depressed in that October. When I got here in July. I remember I stayed with one of the grad students for a few weeks, and I remember washing my hair and combing my hair at her house. So that was in July. I think I came July 27th. Yeah, I think I moved here July 27th, 2022. And I might have washed my hair like the next day, and I combed it. I never combed my hair again.
mm,
So my hair was up. I kept it up in a bun, and
mhm,
at that time my hair gets really really long. So by
mhm,
that time my hair was to my brow length,
mhm.
and I just always wore it in a top knot.
Ah,
Never combed it, never took because I was always just like no energy. I just didn't care. When I'm depressed, I don't care about my appearance.
mm,
I don't care about nothing. And when I got sick, which was 2024,
mhm,
I was like, okay. So like after I started getting help, so I was like, oh, I want to get my hair done. I was like,
mhm,
maybe I can detangle it myself. When I tell you, when I took that hair,
mhm.
band down, it was so mad. I was like, I'm not like, I was like, I can probably comb through it, but it's gonna take me days.
Wow.
I was like, I'm just gonna cut it. I don't even care.
Mhm,
So I had to cut it off. I mean, it took me weeks to clean up my house
mhm,
because I mean, I just had papers and just I hadn't cleaned up. I hadn't washed dishes. It's just I'm so exhausted. I'm so drained.
mhm,
I'm not motivated to do anything. The only thing that I would do really was just like get up in the morning, put like a little headband around my head so you wouldn't really see how bad
Mhm.
my hair was.
Mm.
I bought a lot of tights and
Mhm.
t-shirts, and so I just like tights and t-shirts and tennis shoes, just just very minimal things, just so people wouldn't be too concerned.
Mhm.
Like of course I brush my teeth. I'm like, well, I'm going out in public. I'm gonna brush my teeth now. And I gotta brush my teeth. I gotta wash. So but I mean, it would be sometimes like we had spring break, and I remember like I just stayed in the house. I didn't shower. I didn't brush my teeth. I didn't do anything
Mm.
for a whole like week. So and I get to those points. So the depression really wipes me out. It wipes. And I know when I'm depressed. Like I start noticing, so I can tell the difference between depression and hypomania. So when I'm depressed, I eat a lot. I eat a lot of food. I eat all day. I eat all night. I sleep all day. I don't have any energy. I don't want to do anything. So everything is very sluggish. I'm just like, whatever. I find myself like watching the same shows over and over again
Mhm.
because it makes me feel like that joy and comfort.
Mhm.
So like I'll watch, like I love Golden Girls, so
Me
I'll just
too.
put it on. It's on Hulu, so I'll
Yes.
just like press play and keep watching. So and I know that, but the bipolar disorder is so funny with the not bipolar, with the hypomania.
Mhm.
It's so funny because I won't realize it at first. Like sometimes it doesn't click in. When it clicks in, it's two things for me. One, like let's say today's Wednesday, right? So let's
Mhm.
say I try to go to sleep and I can't get to sleep. First, I usually say, "Oh, that's probably anxiety. I'm
Mhm.
probably anxious. It's fine, whatever." So let's say I go to sleep and I sleep for like 2 to 3 hours. I'm just like, okay. If I wake up the next day and I'm exhausted, I know that's anxiety. I'm like, oh, you're anxious.
Mhm.
That's it. Okay. If I wake up the next day and I feel like I slept 8 hours, but I only slept like two or three,
Mm.
I'm like, okay, this may be hypomania. So
Mm.
if it happens the next day, I'm like, okay, that's what this is. I'm about to go into a full hypomanic episode. The second thing that happens, that usually kind of happens before, I guess, before like the sleep kicks in, is I can't remember conversations. So
Mm.
like I can have a whole, like I can go the whole day talking, and I'm like, what did I talk, like what did I talk about? Because I'm rambling. Because
Mm.
I'm just like going. And so I don't know what I'm talking about. And so I know the differences. I can tell like, oh no, this is about to be I'm like, oh no. This is about to be a hypomanic episode. And I know the biggest thing to really combat those hypomanic episodes is sleep. You really
Mm.
got to get the sleep back regulated. And so what I do, like I have sleeping pills,
Mhm.
just CVS. I just got some
Mhm.
CVS ones, Unisom.
Mhm.
I'll take those. I'm like, okay, you got to go back to sleep. So I'll
Mhm.
like pop one, girl, get to sleep. If I can't go to sleep, pop two, go to bed.
Mhm.
And once I get that sleep back on track, everything is
Mm.
good. But if I have a hypomanic manic episode of like, and I don't have a psychiatrist appointment, I just call and she'll squeeze me in and say, okay, come in. We need to figure out what we need to do. Yeah.
Interesting. So interesting. Wow. And switching the conversation to anxiety, since you mentioned it, and you and I both suffer from anxiety. What would you say are your symptoms of anxiety? What does anxiety look like for Lindsay?
My anxiety is very intense. My anxiety shows up in so many ways. It is insane. So I guess I'll say the common ones that most people are kind of used to. So of course, the 100 thoughts at a time. You're constantly worrying about things. You're worrying about things that aren't even things you should be worrying about. It's like, why do I even care about? Like, why do I even care about this? Those things are usually first. That I want to say that's like the first thing. I usually don't eat a lot when I'm anxious. Like I don't really have an appetite.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, yeah, I'm just like I don't want to eat. I feel a lot of nausea. Like once it gets extreme, that's when I'm like nauseous.
Mhm.
I may vomit. I have panic attacks. I have anxiety attacks. So that at that point, it's like I have like kind
Mhm.
of went past the threshold.
Mhm.
I actually started. I guess that was a few months back, maybe the mid fall. I started pulling my hair out my head. Like I would
Mm.
be at my desk and I would just be pulling my hair. And I told my psychiatrist, I just told her this, and I was like, I got braids because she's like, oh, your hair looks nice. I was like, oh, thank you. I was like, well, I got braids because I'm pulling out my hair. And she's like, you didn't tell me that. I was like, no, I haven't seen you in like 2 months. And so she was like, if you continue to do it, that we need to kind of figure out like, kind of what you need,
Mhm.
what treatment or what's going, kind of what's going on. So I have a lot of those symptoms. Very forgetful. I have a lot of brain fog.
Mm.
Oof, I can't remember anything when I'm anxious. I forget meetings. I forget, a little thing. I mean, little things, big things.
Mhm.
I'll lose keys. Like leave stuff around. I forget to call this person back or go to this meeting. So I have a lot of brain fog.
Mm.
I think that's one of the biggest. Like, just can't remember nothing. And that sucks being in grad school.
Mm. Oh, yes.
And you're trying to
Yes.
remember stuff.
Yes.
And you get hit up like I can't remember
You're like, I need that short-term memory.
memory. So it's a lot of, I think more so for me, it's a lot of physical, like the physical symptoms that are really just
Mhm.
like intense. And so with bipolar disorder, there aren't many anxiety medications we can take.
Mm.
Those, a lot of them will trigger us to have a hypomanic episode.
Oh,
And so
wow.
yeah, so anxiety will increase your serotonin levels. That increase in serotonin
Mhm.
kicks you will kick you right into
Mhm.
a hypomanic episode, and that actually happened to me before. When I first got on the mental, like we kind of got the mood stabilized, and I told her I was like, I'm so anxious, we got to start on something. She said,
Mhm.
okay, well now that we have the mood disorder kind of together, let's
Mhm.
try fix her. And I was like, well, I've been on that before, but it didn't work. She said, well, you weren't on you weren't on the mood
Mhm.
stabilizer. Maybe it'll work. She's like, I'm going to warn you though, sometimes people have a hypomanic episode when they
Mm.
take your fixer. She said, so if you start feeling a little manic, call me. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, okay. Date by the second day, I think it was the second day, I was like, whoo, I feel good. And I was like, maybe it's the anxiety medication. I was like, maybe I just feel good for the anxiety. Ooh, no,
Mhm.
it was hypomania.
Mhm.
I mean, I went because I was supposed to see her that following week, and from day 2 to day 7, I slept 8 hours.
Mm.
I was going to work 8 hours a day. I was sleeping about 2 hours a night, an hour and a half, and I was going like I was just like full steam. I hit like nothing was stopping me.
Wow.
My niece and nephew at the time were living with me, and
Mhm.
my sister, she was at work, and I was so up there. I was like, y'all want to buy like my nephew like video games, and I was like, you want some video games? He was like, what? And I was like, yeah. I was like, get whatever game you want. I was like, come on, y'all, let's go to Target.
Mhm.
And that was at the time we were shopping at Target. So
Yeah. Before the
that was the
boycott.
time we were shopping. That before the boycott. And so we go to Target, and I buy him like 3 or 4 games. And my niece,
Mm.
we go to the mall, I buy her tennis shoes, and I got my nephew some Jordan. I mean, I was just like,
Wow.
and that's just, that's what it is. Like you so high, you so up there, like, woo, let's go. And
Really?
it was crazy. So I remember I went to my psychiatrist the next week, and I was like, so I'm definitely experiencing hypopania. She was like, why didn't you call me? I said, because I feel good. She was like, no.
Like I know this is mania, but I feel good.
She was like, I was like, but it feels good. She's like, that's the biggest problem. She's like, a lot of people who experience like
Oh
hypomania and
man.
mania, it
Mhm.
feels so like you've been depressed so long, and now you're like, oh, I feel so good. You're just like, I don't want this to
Wow.
end. You're just like, I don't want this to end. Because the downside of it is depression. So when you
Wow.
come off that high, it's like you're gonna kind of tank. And so what we had to do was we had to stop the fixer. She said, now we're gonna stop it. She said, so it's cold turkey. She said,
Ooh.
and I'm gonna
And that's a
warn you.
drug that you don't want to get
Yeah.
off of cold turkey. I mean, I've
And so
missed
she
a
told me that.
pill and I was like,
You can tell the difference.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
My
you can
blood
tell the
pressure was
difference.
dropping, everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So she told me, she said, be aware if you start getting too depressed, like give us a
Mhm.
call if you start getting too depressed so we can kind of figure things out. And I was like, okay. And so I got off it maybe like 3 or 4 days later. I could feel my mood
Going
kind of
down, yeah.
tapering off and kind
Mhm.
of getting down. But then she had me scheduled for the following week.
Mhm.
So she's like, let's check in. Like, I was like, yeah, I could tell I'm a little depressed. She's like, which is normal coming off that medication. So definitely have to be careful. And I always tell people, even when I go see like a regular doctor,
Mhm.
like, hey, I have bipolar disorder. So whatever you about to try to prescribe me, just keep that in mind. I'm taking the amygdala. Like, don't do
Yeah.
nothing.
Don't do
Don't
anything to
do
mess that
nothing.
up. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Goodness gracious. So it sounds
It's a
like,
time.
do you know your triggers?
So let me see. Anxiety, I would say for me, I because anxiety for me, it it never really goes away. Like
Mm-hmm.
I take gabapentin for anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
so it's always there, but it's kind of like taking the edge off,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's kind of taking the edge off. One of the, I guess, I think like the biggest triggers for me is really just like not getting rest,
Mm-hmm.
like really not and not getting like good rest,
Mm-hmm.
and so that will definitely trigger like anxiety. So
Mm-hmm.
anytime I'm like not eating well, if I'm not getting rest, if I'm not moving my body, like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I try to go like now when I'm in lab, I'm like, okay, you need to take a 15-minute break every hour. You need to get out, walk, stretch, like stretch your body.
Yeah.
This is an intense, field.
Mm-hmm.
You need a break.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to like step away and like take a break because I know just sitting in front of a computer getting frustrated because I can't think of what to write or
Mm-hmm.
this experiment is not working. I'm gonna get the anxiety gonna kick in. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you gotta kind of step away. So being overwhelmed is a lot. Like if I start taking on too much, then that'll trigger it because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, I gotta do this and
Mm-hmm.
I told this person and I
That's
got
me too.
and
Yeah.
so So it's like I remember my old therapist told me a lot of people who have anxiety, when they take anxiety medication, because you're so used to being anxious, you will create anxious environments.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and she said, she's like, you just so used to it, like your
Mm-hmm.
body has just gotten accustomed to always being anxious.
Mm-hmm.
She said, you will start to put yourself in anxiety triggering situations because you're so used to just being anxious. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's what I'm doing. So that's definitely like a lot of times it's just it's sleep, it's not stepping away, it's not taking a break, and that stuff just will knock you up out of there. Bipolar disorder, sleep, of course, sleep will definitely trigger it. That's like the biggest thing,
The
like not
sleep.
like the sleep. So like, you know, going out and drinking and you have too many
Mm-hmm.
drinks. So when you drink, you don't get adequate sleep. People are
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm gonna drink and go to bed. I'm like, well, you gonna go to sleep, sweetheart, but you're not gonna sleep well. So, those type of things. Of course, being on medication, you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be drinking that much as well.
Exactly.
My psychiatrist like, girl, you can have a glass of wine and that's it. I was like, what?
Know your
She was
limit.
like,
Know
yeah,
your
girl.
limit.
she,
Yeah.
she was like, you gotta stop. Um, so alcohol, not getting a lot of rest. I think the rest is the biggest
Mm-hmm.
like symptom heavy trigger. It's like really getting some good rest, getting the body relax. Really trying to
Mm-hmm.
just relax the body. Is kind of my biggest things. Yeah.
You said something interesting. That anxiety is always there. I realized my
Mm-hmm.
anxiety was always there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think for me, giving childbirth exasperated it, right? And I think there are
Mm-hmm.
many of
Mm-hmm.
us, especially women,
Mm-hmm.
especially Black women,
Mm-hmm.
that are suffering with undiagnosed anxiety. And part of it is just
Mm-hmm.
the trauma that our ancestors have been through, and many of them pass it down to us genetically. Because I look at my mom, she
Mm-hmm.
shows behavior of anxiety, and my grandmother, and so on and so forth, right? And so for me, it's like it's over. Everything is over. It's
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
analyzing everything. It's over
Mm-hmm.
protecting
Mm-hmm.
my children. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
everything just becomes over the top for me, and it's just like
Mm-hmm.
and so um and you have to know when you're in that, you're reeling in your head about
The
certain
cycle.
situations, yeah,
Yep.
that
Yep.
that are that you don't need, it's like making mountains out of molehills, right? That
Yes.
saying, right? And I talk about
Yes.
it in my book, The Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds, that I recognize after I had my first child. I was like, something's off.
Mm-hmm.
Something I didn't know. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know it was anxiety, and I
What it
didn't know how to
was. Yeah.
explain it. But I was just,
Mm-hmm.
I was literally like afraid every day. I would wake up with fear, like,
Yep.
something's gonna happen, something bad is gonna happen, and then you see something on TV, right? And it could be like a show, and they show something with a child or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna happen to
Mm-hmm.
my child. And I'm just,
Yep.
that fear cycle.
Snowball.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I
Yeah.
went to my doctor and I just started crying. And I was like, I don't know what it is, but something is just
I need
wrong.
help.
Yeah, and I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we started, experimenting with the medication, and I found
Mm-hmm.
um my best friend at Bexor. So and we've been rocking ever
Y'all been
since.
locked in ever
We've been
since.
locked in
Yeah.
ever since.
Ever since. I mean, that's a real thing, and like we mentioned in the beginning, just we have a lot of expectations put on us, and
Oh,
I think
absolutely.
those expectations really drive a lot of anxiety for Black women. We always have to be everything for
The
everybody. We got to
pressure,
do everything.
yes.
The pressure, and that just keeps you on edge. It just
Hmm.
keeps you anxious. So you have to be, really care. I know when my son was small too. Like you said, I was so concerned with like people gonna think I'm a bad mom and
Yes.
whatever.
Hmm.
I was just like, and I was always, kind of
Hmm.
up there. So and it's like you said, that expectation, and women get judged so hard.
Oh my goodness,
Moms,
yes.
ooh,
Yes, and we
you
judge
become my
each other.
mom.
It's crazy. Why are we judging each
Hello,
other?
hello,
We're all in the
hello.
same thing together.
Same thing together. We will judge each other. We will judge ourselves. It's rough. And I do think it's good to have moms, people that you can relate to. I know here I don't really, other than graduate school, but because I am older than everybody, they're all in their 20s. I mean, we're friends,
Hmm.
but you want somebody who's,
Yep.
kind of in that same age,
Yep.
they've experienced life, they kind
Hmm.
of, they may have kids.
Hmm.
So I don't have that. And so I kept saying, I was like, I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do something. So now I'm happy because I am going to, it's like this Black women's what is it, happy hour? Yeah, it's like a happy hour.
Hmm.
And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna sign up and I'm gonna go. So that's in like 2 weeks. But and I think that's gonna be good. Hopefully I'll be introduced to some
Hmm.
moms and some other women,
Hmm.
and just meet some people. I'm in grad school at Ohio State.
Hmm.
It ain't that many Black
Yep.
people in
Yep.
my
Yep.
program. It's only three of us in my program. So,
Yes. Oh yeah.
yeah, so this is really gonna be good to be
Hmm.
around some Black women, and for the most part, Black women, we lift each other up.
We
We really
do.
try to
We
be there. We
empower
try
and
to be
yes.
supportive. We
Hmm.
empower. We like, girl, oh, I know this person who can help you out. I
Yeah.
got this connection.
Hmm.
And so I think it'll be good. And hopefully, like I said, hopefully there'll be some moms there who will be
Hmm.
like, oh, I have a son or I have a, daughter, whatever, and yada, yada, yada. So I think that's that community, I think is going to
Oh,
help me. Yeah, it's going to help me
like you
out.
said, we are
Yeah.
communal beings, and we
Yes.
and we
Yes.
got to find our community. I joined Mocha Moms, and I'm sure there's a chapter where you are. It's
Okay.
nationwide, and I remember I opened up. This is right after I had my daughter, and I was dealing with all the things, the postpartum, the anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a book club meeting, and I didn't even read the book, and I was like, I didn't read the book, but I just need to get out of the house, and I remember sharing there. I was like, I just don't feel right.
Yeah.
I just feel off. And I was like, I don't know if it's new mommy, you're in that new mommy mindset that's causing
Mm-hmm.
it or what. But I was like, I just don't feel right. So definitely find your community, find a chapter of
Mm-hmm.
Mocha Moms, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Find a group, find people, plug in because we
Yeah.
heal in groups as well. And
Yep.
women need each other.
Yep.
So, what would you say, Lindsay,
Yes.
to someone who's listening and they hear some of this in themselves? They hear the symptoms and they're like, okay, I checked this box, I checked this box. This
Mm-hmm.
resonates with me. What she said resonates with me. What would you say to them?
I think the biggest thing is to understand that whatever you are feeling is valid. If you feeling it, you feel it. You sit with it, feel it, and say, okay, what are my next options? We have a lot of resources at our fingertips, but I
Yeah.
totally understand that stigma and shame, and you got it under control, like I said earlier, and you can figure it out. So I totally get that. But I definitely, there are definitely a lot of resources, and you have so many, we have much more options now.
Hmm.
So you can kind of play the field and kind of really figure out like what works for you. If you aren't comfortable, maybe, my dad started going to therapy. He just, yeah, he was like,
Whoa.
oh, I'm gonna go to therapy. And I was so surprised. I was like,
Wow.
what?
Yes.
And so I remember he first time he went, he called, that's how I found out. And he called me and he was like, well, I went, but like I left because I don't like to open up and stuff. And he's like, so I just like I went for like 2 minutes. I turned right, and I said I could have gone either one or two. Right, I could have told him, you ain't need to be there. Like I could have like beat him down. I'm like, why
Mhm.
didn't you stay? And you know what I told him? I said, that's really good.
Mhm.
That's so. I was like, I'm
Oh,
so
that's
proud of you.
good. Yeah.
I'm so glad you went, even if it was 2 minutes. You still went.
That's a good
And I
approach.
said, the good, yeah. And I told him, I said, even though you were there 2 minutes, they gonna be there next week.
Mhm.
You go for 2 more minutes. And I was like, you don't even, and I said, you don't even have to talk. You can literally just go and listen because it was group therapy. I was
Mhm.
like, just go sit in there. Just go sit and listen. You don't have to say a word. And he was like, he was like, yeah, you're right. And he was like, it's a male group. And,
Mhm.
he was like, yeah, maybe I'll do that next time.
Mhm.
And so then he went and he said, yeah, he said, well, I stayed the whole time. He said, I didn't really talk, but I just sat there. And
Mhm.
he was like, it was good because like I heard other people,
Mhm.
saying about how they feel. And he's like, it was he's like, some young cats there. And he was like, I was just thinking like, maybe I could talk to them. He was like, maybe I could talk to them and tell them like, this is my journey and
Mhm.
here's some things I learned so you won't do it. So even if you start and you're like, I don't really want to go there, like, or I don't really want to try this, just go. Just just go see how it feels. If it doesn't work, you don't have to go. You are
Right.
not locked in.
Exactly.
Therapists don't make you sign a contract. Like you
This
don't
isn't
have
the
to do that.
gym.
Yeah, you just go, you try it out, and you don't like it, then you either you can say, well, I'm gonna try it out again or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
um but definitely your feelings are valid.
Mhm.
You know you better than anybody else. You
Mhm.
know your body, you know your mind, you know when you, like you said, when you feel good, you don't.
Mhm.
Nobody can tell you that but you.
Mhm.
If you want to start out with some easy things, something that I did when I was young, I journaled a
Mhm.
lot. I used to journal. Oh my
Oh,
gosh, it was
that's
crazy how many
good.
journals I went through,
That's
and I
good to
was
be
able to
doing that
get that
young.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that, maybe you want to start there, like, okay, let me get this out. Maybe you want to start smaller with like, okay, I'm just going every day, I'm gonna sit outside for
Mhm.
15 minutes.
Mhm.
Little things. If you're like, let me start little and kind of work my way up,
Mhm.
that's fine. And you may find that those little things may help you. Maybe you're
Mhm.
like, oh wow, now that I drink water every day, I feel better.
Right.
I
Yeah.
feel better. So your feelings are valid. Try things out, and try it even if you're afraid, even if you're
Mhm.
terrified. Still try it, still go, take that chance,
Mhm.
and see how it feels. So that would definitely be my two pieces of advice. Do not invalidate yourself. The world
Right.
will do that for you.
Yes. Yes. Great
You
point.
don't need to do that to yourself. So you take, believe you, know you.
Mhm.
Don't let people steer you away from your feelings and your thoughts. That's on them. In the words of my therapist, that's they sugar honey iced tea. It's not yours. It don't
There
have
you
nothing
go.
to do with you. She used to tell me that. She's like, hey, the people with that negative stuff ain't got nothing to do
This
with you
has
now.
nothing to do with you.
So
That's this. That's I
do what
like
you.
that. Yes.
She's like, that's their stuff. She's like that. So just remember that. That's their stuff.
Mhm.
This don't got nothing to do with you. So yeah.
And I'm hoping that bipolar and anxiety becomes more normalized and
Oh yes.
because there's so many people getting diagnosed with it and
Yes.
coming out like yourself, Lindsay, and talking about it until it'll be just, you know, another
Yep.
thing that that many of us have because there's so many people. Don't feel like you're alone. There's so many
Mm-mm.
people and there's so
Mm-mm.
many productive people who live great lives.
Mm-hmm.
Still, like you said,
It's not the end of the
it's
world.
not the end of the
It's
world. You
not
can
the end of
still
the
be a parent. You
world.
can still achieve all of your
Yep.
goals, even with the
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis. It's not the sum
Mm-hmm.
total of you. Lindsay, how can people find you?
You can find me online I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Yeah. I'm like, oh, and I'm on YouTube. I'm like, wait a minute, because I was like, I got off of something. I'm not on Twitter anymore, so because
Yeah.
I don't use Twitter anymore.
Mhm. Yep.
But
Same.
you can find me. You can find me at Consciously Coping.
Mhm.
So you can find me at Consciously Coping on Facebook. We have a Facebook group.
Mhm.
I have a YouTube channel, and of course Instagram. I'm more frequent on Instagram than I am on Facebook and
Mhm.
YouTube. I plan to start doing YouTube again once I pass my qualifying exam. When I get over that,
When you get
y'all,
over
I'm
that
like, I
hump.
gotta pass. Yeah, I gotta pass, and I can't get put out. So once I get over that, then I'll be back. But yeah, and if I always tell people, I'm not one of those people who say reach out to me and I don't mean it. I'm serious. If you literally are like, I need to find a therapist
Wow.
and I don't know how to do it,
Yeah.
you can message me. You can say, hey, I saw you here, or I
Mhm.
saw your Instagram, whatever, and I have a quick question. How do I find a therapist? I will message you back and like send you literally a list of
Oh,
like, hey,
wow.
here's a list of people. And I have a document. I have to find it. I saved it somewhere, but I do have a document with a list of mental health like organizations and like scholarships. So I just need to find it. But even if I can't find it, I know where, I know
No.
who to
Just
send you to. I'm also a board member of Depressed While Black, which is a great which is a great 501
mhm.
non C5 nonprofit. Definitely check out Imani's work. She does a lot of great things, and I'm so happy to be a member on
Wow.
that. So you can also check me out there too. We'll start doing some cool things. We'll get some things started here in Ohio. But yeah, reach out to me. Like I said, it's I'm not a mental health professional, so don't send me a message. When you're in crisis, you need to get help. I'm not the person to help you. I'm not an MD. I'm not a therapist, but I can definitely send you in kind of the right direction. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, Lindsay. Yes, y'all find her, locate her because she has so much awesome information on her site. And she's an excellent person, as you can see here. So a good person to follow. Lindsay Anderson, everyone. Thank you, Lindsay. We appreciate this. This has been a dope
Yes.
conversation. We are
Yes.
all walking away with so much knowledge. Thank you all for listening in. Follow me, join me on the Black Girl's Guide to Healing Emotional Wounds. Find me on all socials, IG, Najma Smalls in real life. And thank you for checking us out. Have a good evening.